This is Garis, masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2-3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW. Written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 559, part 2, entitled "The core idea of feminism is deeply misandrist." Continuing straight on. Masculists put tremendous moral pressure on young women to get off their fat parasitic asses and fit up, or be forced to rot on a shelf, since when most men become masculists, no man will be willing to be manslaved by a fluffy parasite who will then be ignored to death. You hated fluffy feminist hypocrite genociders have taken over the divorce courts and made them so toxic that you have become indirect genociders, wiping out whole populations. You see men as cash machines to be robbed and abused. You rip a divorcing man's kids away from him with a 90% probability. You give his house to his divorcing ex-wife so she can raise her kids in it. He loses half his wealth and stuff to her. He's forced to pay for his kids, whom he is barely allowed to see. And if his ex-wife is a real fluffy, manslaving, divorce-raping bitch, he may be forced to pay her alimony for the rest of his life, with no legal nor moral obligation on her to get off her fat parasitic ass and fip up, so that she stops leeching off him for decades, making her so hated by the masculists, who aim to rid the world of such women, such fluffy parasites, by forcing them to rot on the shelf, manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, and spat at, utterly rejected, to the point of extermination. You women force unwanted paternity onto men, manslaving him for decades. You women have the MARA, maternity rejection right. So you have the legislative right to reject an unwanted pregnancy that could ruin your life. But men don't have the PARA, paternity rejection right. So a woman can lie to her man that she's taking the pill, but isn't, gets pregnant, then forces the man to pay for the costs of the kid for 2 decades. This is gender oppression on a very deep level that makes masculists have such a hatred of women who commit this dastardly gender crime of forced fatherhood. Related to women's pill lying is women's paternity fraud, where the woman claims that the kid growing in her is his when she knows it's not. Imagine the level of callousness that such a woman would need to be able to lie to her man in such a way. Masculists have a real hatred of such women and aim to see them put behind bars for 15 years for committing paternity fraud, a gender crime more serious than rape that usually gets 10 years in prison. We masculists want political changes. We push for the creation of a FIP society in which women are taught to be FIPs or are severely punished by men by not getting one. We masculists want the establishment of GECs, that's GECs, gender equality committees, in the parliaments that consist half of feminists and half of masculists, so that the gender issues of both sexes are dealt with equally. The fact that you monoconscious feminazis strongly object to this idea only increases the level of hatred against you by the masculists due to your monoconscious feminazi bigotry, your hypocrisy, your delusion that gender oppression is a one-way street, so that only men should be punished, whereas in fact you women oppress men far worse, so that women should also be punished. So we masculists want the GECs to legislate the PARA, the OPTAB, OPTAB, that's obligatory paternity testing at birth for all births, to counter women's paternity fraud. At the lowest socio-economic level, a third of pregnancies involve paternity fraud, a massive gender crime against men, and so of course is massively hated by the masculists, who aim to stamp it out with new gender laws passed by the geeks. You're not listening to me, are you, you monoconscious feminazi cunt? You've been brainwashed all your life that gender oppression is a one-way street, which is what feminism teaches you. You don't give a shit about men. You are callous and stupid, and the type of women masculisted men utterly reject. So to masculists, there is at least one satisfaction, and that is that women like you will be forced by men to die out, to have your monoconscious feminazi genes removed from the gene pool. Women like you are only useful as anti-models to young women, whom we masculists terrify by threatening them that if they end up like you, they will not get a man, and so will die a slow, miserable death, manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, and utterly rejected, left to rot on the shelf. We masculists target your boyfriends, teaching them masculism so that they become biconscious, then see your monoconsciousness as gender political bigotry and become disgusted with you for being MFBs, that's monoconscious feminazi bigots, and then dump you. So the masculists are predicting that over the next decade, millions of monoconscious feminists are going to go through a lot of pain as they lose their formerly monoconscious male feminist boyfriends, if they do not become biconscious faster than their boyfriends. Once men see that women oppress men worse than vice versa, then the monoconscious bigotry and hypocrisy of feminists become intolerable and generate real masculinist hatred of such women, especially women who commit massive gender crimes against men. You probably haven't absorbed all these masculinist ideas just now, but you will. They are spreading across the planet, and millions of men are becoming masculisted and MGTOW'd, rejecting the traditional role of being a man-slave to a fluffy woman who parasites off the money and labour of a man, making her a hated, man-slaving, divorce-raping cunt, the type of woman that the masculists are aiming to wipe out by effectively exterminating them, by forcing them to rot on the shelf. So go fuck yourself, you monoconscious feminazi bigot, literally. Since as masculism spreads, there will be fewer and fewer men who are prepared to swallow your monoconscious feminazi drivel. They will just crush you with masculist hatred and venom. Millions of men are learning that women oppress men worse and are rising up in anger and hatred, talking increasingly of a sex war. You fluffy feminist hypocrite genociders have made divorce so toxic that in many countries now 2/3 of young men and growing refuse to marry and have kids, since they refuse to face a 1 in 4 risk of being butchered in the hated fluffy feminist dominated divorce court system. When whole populations are being wiped out, then tremendous moral, legal and later military pressure will be applied to men fair the divorce courts and the gender laws in general. You feminists have gone wildly overboard, causing the gender political pendulum to have swung violently too far. So it needs to be brought back to its lowest equilibrium point, and that is the task of the masculists. You monoconscious feminists will become biconscious, or we masculists will bite your fucking heads off. A few years from now, you feminists will be feeling as though you have been hit by a bus, the masculist bus, as it slams into the core idea of feminism that is so deeply misandrist and hence so hated. When men become collectively angry and hateful at women, then God help women. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man's Slaves to Women, and e-textbook of 550 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses, freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.